Okay, back to our Shakespeare play then. Now, I've been asked quite a few times, how is it possible to put the character name alongside the first line of the speech? Now, I'm showing you an example here of a printed book which has exactly that arrangement, and it is quite common to see that in a printed book of a Shakespeare play. Not always, but that's certainly one way that it's presented. However, what we have at the moment, as you can see in my example here, is we have actually the character name sitting above the first line. So in other words, there is a paragraph break there. Let me just bring up my hidden characters and so forth and show you what I mean. So we've basically got here, if you look down at the bottom, a break, an actual hard break there, and so these are two separate things. There's a paragraph for the name of the character and then a paragraph for the first line of the speech. Now, if I'm going to do this, and I'm going to step you through the process that I think works, but what I'm going to do is just to explain that if you want to do this, of course, we've got to make sure that there's going to be enough space to put those character names. And not everybody has the same situation, because some plays have longer character names than others, and some Shakespeare plays even have character names that are two words, like first messenger and things like this. So you might have to be a little bit careful as to how you organise this. However, I'm going to just scroll through my mind just to go to the next one, because I know that I've got this name here, Hippolyta, which is actually quite long. So the first thing I'm going to have to do really is to put a longer indent on my verse line text. Also, I should remind you before I go any further that some of us have got both verses, which I'm showing you here in this left-hand page here, and the right-hand page. This, what you see here, is all verse, single lines, they're individual paragraphs. On the other hand, I know that I have in my second scene, I'm just going to scroll through it and go to the second scene. I know that in my second scene, I do actually have prose. So this is prose. So here we are, and this part here is prose, for example. So I need to be aware of that, because I will need to just make sure that both of these methods that I'm going to use work for both of those situations. So let me go back to this second page, for example, here. Well, we'll look at this page here because we've got Demetrius, which is actually quite long. So the thing is, if I'm going to use that particular size of typeface, then obviously I'm going to have to increase the size of this indent. Well, that could be changed, because I could actually reduce the size of that. I could reduce it down somewhat. And that might actually help as well. So let me just go ahead and do that first of all. So I've got my character style, and actually what I'm going to do is just to reduce the size of that down to 10 point, and that should at least give me a little bit more advantage. I'm using semi-bold, which is probably good, but in a way it's not relevant, as you'll see in a moment, because we still will need to make a change to this. But anyway, that's the first step that I'm going to make. Then what I'm going to do is to use a construction line on this page, and I'm just going to bring this over. I want my indent to be about like that, so that I've got enough space to show that longer character name. As I say, this might be sort of preparatory work that you're going to have to do to resolve the issue for yourself, but I'm only doing this on one page at the moment, so that I know what I'm going to have to do throughout the whole book. So here's my verse line then. And what I'm going to do with my verse line is I'm going to increase the indent. So I'm going to put an indent on here of a little bit more than I had before, so it's 21 millimeters. Now there is a first line indent, a negative first line indent. The reason for that is that if the verse line happens to be long and needs to wrap, then it does at least indent it very slightly on the second line. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, because that's very unusual. There's not many times that is actually happening. So I'm going to go for that. Now, what we need to do is we need to actually change the first line. We need something that would be a different style for the first line of the speech after the character. So what I'm going to do is to go to my verse line, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to give it a name of verse line after speech, after character, like so. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to give it well, no, I'm not going to do anything to it at the moment. I'm just going to leave it like that. So I've got that there available to me. So, and what I'm going to do is just to do this for just on one item here, so that we then know what we've got to search for, because we're going to do find replace to do the whole thing. So what I need to do actually is I need to remove this hard break and change it into a tab like this. So now I've got this tab here. What I need to do is to change this style. So this style here, I'm going to use verse line after character, like so. And what I'm going to do with this verse line after character is I'm going to change the first line, the indents and spacing again. So I'm going to make that first line indent to 0. I think it won't go to 0 because it needs this to be remain to 0 as well, first of all. So I'm going to reduce that down to 0. Now, of course, everything's moved, so I'm just going to have to find it now because it's probably gone back to here. Yes, so it's gone back to this bottom of this page. No worries. We're just focusing it on here at the moment. Now, what we've got here is a tab that's happening here, and what we need to do is to adjust that tab. So I need to go to my style. I'm just going to move this out of the way so that you can actually see what's going on. And I'm going to go to my tabs here, and I've got a tab at the moment. There's no tab set, but what I'm going to do is to take this tiny little bottom triangle and move it along until it goes to, if I can, okay, we've got to actually now move this one back to the beginning and move this one back to here. It looks like it's not going to be able to do that. Oh, I see. Okay, there it is. Right, so there we have it. So now I've lined that up together there. Let me just hit OK. So we've got this one line working. However, what we now want to do really is, if we want to make this look any different, then what we need to do is to create a character style for this. So I'm going to create a character style. So I'm going to my characters. I'm going to make a new style. I'm going to just give it a new style here, and I'm going to call this character before speech, something like that. Okay, so that basically now allows me to do something different to it. So I can change the font style, for example. So let's say I want to make it semi-bold again. Or I can even change the actual font again to what I had before. So I've got Chaparral Pro, and I'm changing that to semi-bold. I'll give it a different color again. Not that it needs to be, but just for the sake of making it look the same. Okay, so now we have it. We have done that one line. So we have fixed it for that one line. And so what we need to do now is to figure out how we're going to do this globally across the whole thing. Oh, there is one more thing that I need to do for this style here, this paragraph style here. I also need to give it a bit more space above. So I'm going to indents and spacing. This, of course, will move it on to the next page. So don't be surprised if it disappears. I now need to provide a space before, and I'm going to make that 2 millimeters. I'm going on to the next page, and here you can see this is actually working now. So I've got Demetrius on the first line. So yeah, so that's now working for the that will now work for our verse line. So what I need to do now is to go, I'm going to basically set this back to what it should be, what it was originally, and then I'm going to do a find, I'm going to use find and replace to actually go through this to make sure that everything is now consistent and looks like this. Okay, so let's first of all just get rid of this. So I'm getting rid of the tab, putting that back. I'm now changing this, removing this character style, set that to none, give that the paragraph style of character, and also set this to be verse line. So that should be back to normal. So that's how it is back to normal. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to use the find replace. I'll just go back to the beginning because I need to do it from the beginning. So here I am in the find and change dialog box, and so what I need to do now is to work out how I'm going to find my character name. And the way that I'm going to do this is to first of all say the location, which will be of course at the beginning of a paragraph. And then I'm looking for a run of letters. So I'm using my wildcard and saying any letter. And then I'm repeating this. So I'm going to repeat this one or more times until we then find the paragraph break. So that should find lots of things within the whole play. And of course, that's no good to us. We want to find specifically the actual character name using the style character, and the way that we do that is to limit it then to that style. So there's our character, that's the style that it should find, and I'm now just going to use my find next just to see that that actually works. Okay, it seems to jump around. I don't know why it went straight to that page, but there must be something. Maybe my cursor was probably in the wrong place, but it is finding everything that we want it to find. So I'm going to go back to the beginning again. Okay, and now what I need to do is to decide what I'm going to change it to. So the way that I do this is to put a bracket around the area in our little grep routine. I'm putting a bracket around the bit that we want to keep. So in other words, the run of letters. And the way that we do this is to say what we want to change that to. We want to change it to what we found. And the way we do that is to go to found one. So that will be what it's changed. Now, what we want to put after the run of letters, in other words, the word, we want to put a tab character. So that's what we put here. Okay, so we're now basically, we will have done basic replace or changing of that word and changing the break to a tab. However, what we also need to do at the same time is we need to change the format of this. Now I'm going to go to my paragraph styles, and what I've got here now is something that I've called speech after character. So in other words, it's going to be in terms of the verse, it'll be the first line of verse, but in terms of the prose, it'll also be the first paragraph within the prose. And we're going to have to do some generic changes to these, as you'll see. So I'm going for that. I also can change the character style at the same time. So I'm changing the character style to character before speech. And that should work. We may find that we actually are putting the character style throughout that line, but we can easily remove that, as you'll see in a moment. So I'm going for OK to that. And now I'm going to hit change all because I know that it with the find works. So I'm just going to say change all. It's going to find quite a lot. 481, there we are. So you can see that this has actually worked for that first page. Let's have a look at some other pages here. That's all seems to be working fine. So we've got it working for our verses, as you can see. But if I now go to my second scene, this is actually slightly wrong because this is prose, although it's not prose anymore. It's now being changed to first speech after the character, or whatever I called it. So that's something that I do have to now change slightly, and you'll see what I mean. Let's actually go to this style. I can now turn this off. Don't need that anymore. If I now go to my styles, speech after character, let's just move this out of the way. Now, as you can see, what's wrong is that the first line, when we actually have a verse line, that's actually just one line, and effectively it's a paragraph, and it is set to be aligned on the baseline grid, or at least the first line is. But then there's only one line, so that's why that works. In this case, we are aligning the first line onto the baseline grid, but then after that it's not aligned. So what we need to do is to try to resolve this, and you'll see how we go about doing this. Okay, so let's actually go to our basic character formats, and we need to really, well, the two ways of doing it. We can either change this leading so that it's exactly the same as the baseline grid. That would be one way of doing it. I'll show you what I mean. Let's actually just figure out what the baseline grid is, because I can't remember what that is. Let's go to Preferences, Grids, and look at the baseline grid. So as you can see, the baseline grid is actually 13.512. So I'm actually going to copy that and go back to this style again. Go to my basic character formats and go to my leading and actually paste that into there. Now, as you can see, that's worked. That's actually worked quite well. The only thing that we've got, the problem we've got now, is that we've got a slight indent in the second line of this. That's really because our verse line originally also had that. So we actually need to change this as well. So if we go to Indents and Spacing, you'll see that we've got a left indent, but we've got a negative first line indent. So we have. So in the first version of this demonstration, I went slightly wrong at this point. So I'm re-recording from this point onward because I made a couple of mistakes. So just let me just go through this and explain. First of all, I have actually changed the name of the style. I've changed it to speech first line, mainly because this isn't really just being applied to the verse line. It's actually also being applied to the lines when it's the first prose paragraph. So you've got verses and prose, and these are going to be handled slightly differently. However, what we have to do is to compromise to a certain extent and actually apply the same style to the first line of the speech after the character name in our verse line, and also that same style is applied to the first paragraph of the prose when it appears immediately after the character name. So there is a certain amount of compromise, but as you can see here, this is slightly wrong, what's going on at the moment, because in our prose, which I've got some of this in my my second scene, I've actually got a mismatch between the indenting and also the tab. So the tab and the indent needs to be the same. That's the point. That's really where this is going wrong when we have more than one line. It was okay for the verses. So when we looked at the first iteration of this and it worked well for the verse line, absolutely fine, because there was only one line coming after that name of that speech, name of that character, I should say. So when we're looking at this now, we're looking at more than one line. So we have to make sure that these things all tally up. So the way that we do this is to first of all work on this left indent, first line indent. So I'm going to make this easier for myself by actually making this 20 millimeters in both cases, like so. That's actually moved things along a little bit, because of course I made a mistake there. That should be minus 20 millimeters. Let's actually go back to that. So that's the first step, and that hasn't fixed it yet. But what we now need to do is to go to our tabs for this style, and we need that tab to be 20 millimeters as well. So that's if you just look here, you can see that's our first tab, and that needs to be at 20 millimeters. Like this. So that will mean that they all line up at 20 millimeters. In fact, I can actually actually type in 20 millimeters into here so that it actually is accurate. I mean, I can use the slider, but by actually typing it in, I know that I've got that exactly the same. So we've now got, and I'm going to click OK to that, we've now got a 20 millimeter tab, and a 20 millimeter first line indent and a 20 millimeter negative first line indent. So in other words, it's almost as if you're pushing this over 20 millimeters and then you're bringing it back 20 millimeters. That really takes account, that deals with the second line when you have two lines. Of course, when we go back to our basic verse lines, that's going to be okay because we've only got one line on a line of verse. The only compromise is, and it's a very slight one, is that what we actually have, what we might potentially have is a slight difference with the way that the characters, or the way that the line wraps when the line is too long for the width of the text box. And I'll show you what I mean here. If I now select this text box and artificially make it shorter, you'll see that when I get to this point, this line here that Helena is speaking actually wraps to the next line, but it's actually just going down onto the next baseline, whereas it shouldn't really do that, and it wouldn't do that for other lines. So if I now continue to make this even smaller, you'll see where we actually have the line wrapping. The second line that Lysander is speaking, that is correct. It has to be slightly indented, and also it needs to be not on the baseline, just to indicate that it belongs to that same line. But we've kind of compromised it a little bit, but it isn't really a big deal because we're not often finding that happening on the first line of the speech. So I hope that really clarifies it. And as I say, this is a bit difficult to achieve, but I think I've achieved it fairly satisfactorily now for myself, and I've now corrected the error that I made previously.